r/NoSleep. The 10-step rule was a matter of survival at our cabin. When I was younger, my family owned a small cabin deep in the woods. It wasn't luxurious, but it was cozy and served as a peaceful escape from the city. The cabin was surrounded by towering pines, their shadows stretching long over the mossy ground. My dad used to say the cabin had a heartbeat, a soul of its own, and I believed him, sometimes too much. The cabin was old, passed down through generations, and came with its own set of peculiarities. One rule stood out above all others, the 10-step rule. The rule was simple: if you went outside after dark, you had 10 steps to get to the porch once you blew out the lantern. 10 steps. Not 11. Not 9. 10, exactly. My parents drilled it into me and my brother, Kevin, from the moment we were old enough to venture out alone. Why 10 steps? I once asked my dad. He didn't answer right away, his face shadowed by the firelight. Just count your steps, he replied, his tone sharp. Never forget to count. Kevin and I found the rule silly. It felt like an old superstition, a relic from some bygone era when people were more fearful of the dark. But we obeyed. It was part of the cabin's mystique, another piece of its strange personality. One summer, Kevin and I decided to visit the cabin one last time before it was sold. Our parents were aging, and maintaining the place had become too much. It was bittersweet. The cabin held so many memories: summers spent fishing, winters huddled by the fireplace, nights whispering secrets under blankets. Letting it go felt like saying goodbye to a piece of ourselves. We arrived late in the afternoon, and everything was as we remembered. The wood smelled faintly of pine and ash. The old rocking chair on the porch creaked in the breeze, and the forest hummed with life. As we unpacked, Kevin joked about the 10-step rule. "Do you think it was just to scare us?" he asked, tossing a duffel bag onto the couch. I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe they didn't want us wandering around and breaking our necks in the dark. That night, after dinner, Kevin dared me to test the rule. It was a childish challenge, the kind we hadn't issued to each other in years. But nostalgia and a little too much whiskey loosened our inhibitions. "I'll do it if you do it," I said. Kevin smirked. "Deal." We grabbed the old lantern from its hook by the door and lit it, the flickering flame casting dancing shadows across the yard. The woods loomed around us, darker than I remembered. We took turns, each walking 10 measured steps from the porch, blowing out the lantern, and counting our steps back. Nothing happened. We laughed, teasing each other for being so cautious. The 10-step rule, it seemed, was just a spooky tradition. It wasn't until the third round that something changed. It was Kevin's turn, and as he walked his 10 steps into the dark, I stood on the porch, watching the lantern's glow grow fainter. He blew it out, plunging the yard into blackness. 1, 2. Kevin counted aloud, his voice steady. Suddenly, the air shifted. The hum of the forest dulled, replaced by an eerie silence. My skin prickled. 7, 8. Kevin's voice faltered. "Kevin?" I called out, stepping toward the edge of the porch. 9, he said, his tone tight, strained. There was a pause. "Kevin?" I repeated, louder this time. "Something's wrong," he muttered. 10. I saw his shadow emerge from the trees, but he wasn't alone. Something moved behind him, a darker shadow, tall and spindly, keeping pace with his steps. My breath caught in my throat. "Get inside," I shouted. Kevin bolted up the stairs, slamming into me as we tumbled through the door. We locked it behind us, our hands shaking. I looked through the window but saw nothing. The forest was still, as if mocking us. We didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle outside, set us on edge. By morning, we convinced ourselves it was just the dark playing tricks on us. But deep down, we knew better. Before we left, Kevin went to the edge of the porch, staring into the woods. "What do you think it was?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. Instead, I locked the cabin door behind us for the last time, my hand lingering on the key. I never told Kevin what I saw as he reached the porch that night. I didn't want to scare him more than he already was. But I saw the shadow lean down, as if it whispered something in his ear before fading into the dark. We sold the cabin the following week. I just hope the new owners count their steps. Months passed, and life returned to its routine. Kevin and I didn't talk much about what happened that night, though the memory clung to me like a shadow. It wasn't just the cabin I missed, it was the unshakable feeling that we had left something unfinished, something unresolved. One evening, Kevin called me out of the blue. I could tell by his tone that he'd been drinking, the slight slur of his words giving him away. "Have you heard from the new owners?" he asked, his voice low and hesitant. "No," I replied. "Why?" Kevin hesitated. "I looked them up online. They're a young couple, no kids. Seemed excited about the place when we met them at the closing. But something's wrong." "What do you mean, wrong?" I asked, feeling a chill creep up my spine. Kevin sighed. "They're selling it. Less than 3 months after buying it." "That's odd," I said, though deep down, I wasn't surprised. "Did they say why?" "They didn't have to. The wife posted on some real estate forum, asking how to get out of a sale. She mentioned weird occurrences but didn't go into detail. She said they've been hearing noises at night, and their dog refuses to go outside after dark." I felt my stomach tighten. "Do you think it's related to what happened?" "I don't know," Kevin admitted. "But I can't stop thinking about it. About that thing in the woods." Neither could I. The shadow, the whispers, it was all still so vivid in my mind. After we hung up, I spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that night at the cabin. A week later, Kevin showed up at my apartment unannounced. His face was pale, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "We need to go back," he said. "Are you insane?" I shot back, shaking my head. "The cabin isn't ours anymore. We can't just show up." "I called the new owners," Kevin confessed. "I told them we left some personal items behind and asked if we could come by to pick them up. They agreed." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're dragging me into this mess because you're curious? Kevin, we barely got out of there the first time." He grabbed my shoulder, his grip firm. "Don't you want answers? Don't you want to know what's really out there?" His words hit me harder than I expected. Of course, I wanted answers. The fear, the questions, they had haunted me for months. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go. The drive to the cabin felt longer than I remembered. The trees lining the road seemed taller, darker, as if the forest itself was alive. When we arrived, the new owners greeted us at the door. The wife, Emily, looked exhausted, her eyes hollow and rimmed with dark circles. Her husband, Mark, was no better, his expression a mix of wariness and frustration. "Thanks for letting us come by," Kevin said, his tone overly polite. Emily nodded, her lips tight. "Just be quick. We're leaving tomorrow." As we stepped inside, the air felt different. Heavy. Oppressive. It was as if the cabin itself resented our presence. The familiar creaks of the floorboards sounded sharper, more deliberate, like something was listening. Kevin and I exchanged a glance. "We'll just check the basement," he said. Emily hesitated. "We don't go down there anymore. The dog refuses to even approach the door." "But go ahead." The cellar door was just as we remembered it, its old wooden frame warped slightly with age. Kevin hesitated before pulling it open. The faint smell of damp earth wafted up, and the narrow staircase stretched down into darkness. We descended slowly, our flashlights slicing through the gloom. The hanging light bulb still swayed faintly in the center of the room, as though disturbed by some unseen force. The stacks of boxes remained, though many had been moved or opened by the new owners. "Do you feel that?" Kevin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. The air was colder here, almost icy, and it carried a faint, rhythmic vibration, like the heartbeat my dad always joked about. We approached the far corner where I had seen the shadow. Kevin started pulling boxes aside, his movements methodical and determined. I joined him, though every instinct screamed at me to run. Behind the boxes, we found something we had never noticed as kids, a trapdoor. The wood was warped and splintered, and an old rusted padlock hung loosely from a chain. Kevin stared at me, his face pale. "Do we open it? Do we have a choice?" I replied, though my voice betrayed my fear. Using a crowbar we found among the tools, we pried the trapdoor open. A foul stench erupted from below, making us gag. Shining our flashlights into the hole, we saw a narrow tunnel, its walls lined with jagged roots and crumbling dirt. Kevin dropped to his knees, peering inside. "It looks like it goes on forever." "Let's just seal it back up," I said, my voice trembling. "This is..." "Hello," guttural growl echoed from the tunnel, cutting me off. It wasn't an animal, it was deeper, more resonant, vibrating through the walls and into my chest. Kevin scrambled back, dropping the crowbar. "We need to get out of here. Now." We bolted up the stairs, slamming the cellar door shut behind us. Emily and Mark stared at us, wide-eyed, as we locked the door. You didn't open it, did you? Emily whispered, her voice trembling. What do you mean? I asked, my heart pounding. Emily glanced at Mark, who nodded solemnly. We found the trapdoor weeks ago. We heard something inside. Scratching, growling. We locked it and never went back down. We shouldn't have opened it, Kevin muttered, running a hand through his hair. We've made it worse. That night, as we drove away from the cabin for the last time, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had left something behind. Or worse, that something had followed us. I don't know what lies beneath that cabin, but I know one thing for certain, the 10-step rule wasn't just a superstition. It was a warning. And now, I'm not sure if it's enough.